Carl Jung once observed something deeply unsettling about empathic people, something most individuals are unwilling to accept. There is a widespread belief that empaths are soft, endlessly forgiving, that they tolerate far more than they should, and that because of this, almost everyone makes the same mistake with them. Jung saw the exact opposite. What he understood was that empathy does not equal weakness, and sensitivity does not mean a lack of boundaries. In fact, the more an empath feels, the more precise and irreversible their limits become. Jung noticed that there is an invisible line, and when someone crosses it, there is no explosion. There are no arguments, no shouting, no dramatic confrontations, no revenge. What happens instead is a vacuum, a sudden absence. The empath does not remove you from their phone or block you on social media. They remove you from their inner reality, from their emotional world, from their psychological field. And the most disturbing part is that almost no one realizes the exact moment when that line was crossed. People only discover it when there is no way back, when the warmth is gone, when the access is closed. Empaths do not seek revenge because they do not need it. Removing someone is not a punishment. It is self-preservation. It is a quiet, internal decision made long before it becomes visible on the outside. The real question is this: what emotional mistake causes that final closure? What has to happen for someone who feels so deeply to decide to never feel you again? Jung never used the modern term super empath, but he described this type of person with remarkable precision. These individuals are not just sensitive, they are silent observers. They watch how you act when you are not performing, how you speak when you are not trying to impress, how you behave when you think no one is paying attention. They notice patterns where others see coincidences. They sense the emotional tone of a room before a single word is spoken. Not because they are mystical or magical, but because they pay attention. And here lies the real danger. They do not confront you when they notice something off. They remain quiet. They wait. They give you space, time, and chances. Deep down, they want to be wrong about you. While this is happening, you believe nothing has changed. You think your excuses worked. You assume they did not notice. But you are mistaken. They are building a mental archive. Every contradiction is stored. Every broken promise is recorded. Every subtle manipulation adds weight. Because the empath operates on a different frequency. Where others hear words, they hear intention. Where others overlook details, they register them. A smile that does not match the tone. Everything is fine loaded with tension. A promise made easily and broken quietly. The empath sees it all. They do not judge you. They do not accuse you. They observe. They remember. And more than anything, they hope their intuition is wrong. This is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition, a survival skill sharpened by years of small disappointments rather than dramatic betrayals. Because people do not reveal themselves in grand moments. They reveal themselves in the tiny cracks of the mask. And what an empath sees through those cracks cannot be unseen, ever. Now comes the emotional error that triggers the final elimination. And no, it is not an insult, not an argument, not a single lie. It is something far deeper. It is a pattern. The mistake happens when you make the empath begin to doubt themselves. Not you, but their own perception, their own emotional compass. You do it slowly. You tell them they are exaggerating, that they are too sensitive, that everything is in their head. You dismiss their feelings as if they carry no weight. You deny what is obvious and lie even when they already know the truth. You betray quietly, trusting they will not notice. And when they finally do notice, you make them feel guilty for having noticed at all. You take their empathy, their greatest strength, and you turn it into a weapon against them again and again. And here is the fatal mistake. You believe they will never leave because they care too much. You confuse patience with weakness, silence with ignorance. You assume they will always be there, no matter how much you emotionally disorient them. Jung observed this dynamic repeatedly in his clinical work. He understood that gaslighting is not just lying. It is an attack on another person's reality. It is an attempt to make them stop trusting what they see, what they feel, and what they know. The pattern is almost always the same. Someone comes to the empath carrying problems, chaos, emotional weight, and the empath, by nature, responds with support, with listening, with emotional energy. But something does not align. The stories shift. Actions contradict words. Change is promised, but every solution is subtly sabotaged. "I value you," is said, while boundaries are crossed again and again. "I'm honest," is claimed, while small lies are detected. When the empath asks questions, everything is denied. The story is flipped. The empath is made to feel guilty simply for daring to ask. And that is when the internal switch begins to move, slowly, quietly, irreversibly. Because once an empath realizes that their empathy is being used to distort their reality, something fundamental breaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. The cycle repeats, and then something far more dangerous happens. The empath begins to doubt themselves. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe I'm the problem. That inner war is exactly what the manipulator needs. Because as long as the empath doubts their own intuition, they will not trust it. And intuition is their greatest defense. The moment you convince them to question it, something inside them fractures, but not in the way you might imagine. It doesn't break outwardly, it collapses inward. When the intuition of an empath is manipulated, something changes permanently. Carl Jung described this moment through his concept of shadow integration. The shadow is the part of you that you do not reveal. It is the repressed anger, the necessary coldness, the capacity to defend yourself without hesitation, even if that means removing someone from your life. Most people repress their shadow, but empaths do so more than anyone else. They do not want to hurt others. They do not want to harden themselves. They would rather hurt themselves than cause pain to someone they care about. They choose self-sacrifice over confrontation, silence over boundaries, endurance over truth. But when trust is broken again and again, the shadow cannot remain asleep. And when it awakens, it does not explode or scream. It does not accuse or create scenes. Instead, something far more decisive happens. The empath stops protecting your emotions and starts protecting their reality. This is the exact moment the door closes. Jung recognized this process as an essential stage of psychological growth. It is the moment when a person chooses themselves over a false connection, because the empath realizes something devastating. Keeping you in their life requires betraying themselves. It requires ignoring their instincts, lying to themselves, and pretending not to see what they have already seen. And that price is too high. This realization does not arrive without resistance. The empath fights it. They give you more chances. They search for the good in you. They try to understand you. They work hard to excuse your behavior. They tell themselves stories that soften your actions, minimize their pain, and distort reality so they don't have to lose you. But there comes a point where evidence weighs more than hope. The pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Staying hurts more than leaving. And that is the moment of transformation. There is no rage and no revenge, only clarity. The empath stops being only empathic and becomes powerful, not through aggression, but through elimination. They see the truth and accept it completely. You are not who they hoped you were. You are not capable of offering the relationship they needed. You are not who they believed you would become. Once that truth reveals itself, it cannot be unseen. This is where the mechanism, known as the door slam, comes into effect. The empath does not yell at you. They do not send angry messages. They do not broadcast their version of the story or create drama. They go quiet. They go cold. They disappear emotionally. You notice it immediately. The warmth is gone. The attention is gone. The effort is gone. Now you are speaking to a wall. The empath is present, but no longer with you. They respond, but they give nothing real. They are polite, correct, and distant. You might think they are just upset, that they need time, that it will pass, but it does not pass. This is not anger. It is a decision. This is the door slam, a total emotional closure. At that point, something becomes clear to them. You are no longer safe. You are no longer trustworthy. You are no longer worth their energy. And once that decision is made, it is not negotiated or discussed. It is sealed. Why is there no turning back? Because now they see you. They see who you are when the mask falls. They see your patterns, your games, your repeated lies, and that cannot be forgotten. Jung explained this clearly. When a perception becomes conscious, it cannot be erased. If you see someone lie to your face while holding your gaze, that image remains. If you feel someone manipulating you while pretending to care, that sensation does not disappear. Awareness changes everything. Once the empath integrates this truth, they do not harden into cruelty. They simply withdraw access. And that silence, that absence, is not punishment. It is self-preservation. The empath's intuition is the foundation of everything they are. Attack it often enough, and you destroy the very base of the bond. Because trust is not only about honesty, it is about allowing yourself to be seen clearly and accurately. When you manipulate an empath, you are telling them that their perception is wrong, that their inner knowing cannot be trusted, that they should go blind to what they feel and sense. And they will not do that. An empath will always choose to lose you before losing themselves because their connection to their inner truth is not negotiable. That is the true price of betrayal. It is not revenge, it is survival. The empath eventually understands something final and irreversible. Staying connected to you means becoming disconnected from who they truly are. And that equation can never work. They tried to make it work. They bent themselves into shapes that were never meant to fit. They dimmed their light so it would not intimidate you. They silenced their instincts to keep the peace. They sacrificed their truth again and again just to preserve the connection, until one moment of clarity changed everything. They finally saw that the connection was never real. It was built on their effort and your deception. It survived on their hope and your manipulation. It was never balanced, never mutual, never safe, and they are no longer willing to pretend otherwise. Shadow integration does not happen all at once. It unfolds in stages. In the first stage, the empath feels that something is off. There is no concrete proof yet, only a persistent discomfort, a quiet inner alarm that refuses to turn off. Then comes the second stage, the internal confrontation. Questions begin to surface. Questions they do not want to ask, but can no longer avoid. Is this real? Am I imagining things? Why do I feel this way every time? In the third stage, the empath tests you, not to punish you, but to see if you are capable of something basic and essential. Honesty, respect, boundaries, they give you real opportunities to show up differently. And this is where most people fail. Instead of correcting the behavior, they defend it. They become defensive when questioned. They accuse the empath of exaggerating or being too sensitive. And that moment becomes the turning point, the final test, because that is when the empath understands something simple and brutal. You are not going to change, and you cannot be trusted. That is when the door begins to close. In the fourth stage, the shadow takes the lead. The kind part becomes neutral. The generous part withdraws. Forgiveness stops being a process and becomes a conclusion. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. The empath learns to use their sensitivity as a shield instead of a bridge. They learn that not everyone deserves access to their inner world, and that boundaries are not punishment, they are survival. Because now they understand something powerful. Protecting themselves is not hurting you. Saying no is not being cold. Walking away is not giving up. It is choosing reality over fantasy, health over habit, and choosing themselves over the illusion that one day you might change. And this is why it becomes unforgivable. Forgiveness requires hope. It requires believing that damage can be repaired, that behavior can change, that trust can be rebuilt. The empath has already done the calculations. They observed your pattern. They measured the risk. They counted the cost. And the numbers do not add up because you cannot rebuild trust with someone who distorts reality. Manipulation is the opposite of honesty. It is the deliberate twisting of facts to protect oneself. And someone who does that once will do it again. The empath knows this. It is not stubbornness, it is lucidity. Because when you show an empath that you can lie to their face and make them doubt their own mind, you have revealed your essence, and they believe exactly what you showed them. This is where most people make another fatal mistake. They assume empaths are weak because they feel deeply. They believe empaths will always return out of guilt. They think compassion can be used against them forever. They fail to understand something crucial. Guilt only works while the empath still sees you as human. When the door closes, that changes. You stop being a person and become a concept, a lesson, a boundary. You become living proof of what they will never tolerate again. This is the real shift in power. The empath is no longer the victim. They are now the authority. They have assessed your value and decided you have none. This is not hatred, because hatred requires energy. This is indifference. And indifference is the true opposite of love. It is the exact emptiness where you once existed in their world. And here is the part that almost always happens. The one who crossed the line tries to come back. They always do. They reappear after some time, apologize, claim they have changed. They say they finally understand and ask for another chance. The empath does not respond with emotion or responds with short, empty, polite, distant words. This is not cruelty, it is protection. That relationship has already been processed, already grieved, already closed. The other person becomes confused and says things like, "You used to care so much, what happened to you?" What happened is simple. The empath stopped lying to themselves. They stopped pretending you were someone you were not. They stopped waiting for you to become who they needed. They accepted reality exactly as it is. And the reality is this: you are no longer someone they can trust. Real power is not shown through words. It is shown through consequences. The one who crossed the line then tries everything: guilt, accusations, playing the victim. They say the empath is cold, cruel, resentful, unfair. They remind them of the good times. They promise a different future. They try to use empathy as a weapon one last time. Nothing works because there is no longer access. The door is not closed. It is off the map. The empath has integrated their shadow, and because of that, they are now immune to these tactics. They learned something final. Protecting their peace is more important than protecting your feelings. They learned that their instinct is sacred. They learned that those who manipulate others are not confused. They are dangerous. And they learned to value themselves more than any false connection. This is the ultimate consequence. Not anger, not revenge, not drama, indifference. You stop mattering. Your words lose weight. Your presence loses impact. Your apologies fall into emptiness, not because they are not heard, but because they no longer mean anything. You are now irrelevant. Jung believed that true growth requires the integration of opposites: light and shadow, empathy and detachment, compassion and limits. The empath who closes the door has completed a crucial stage of development. They learn to balance care with self-preservation. They learned that boundaries are not walls, but filters that protect what is sacred. They learned that not everyone deserves access to their energy, and that realization changes everything. It makes them stronger, wiser, more selective, and more powerful, because now they know their worth, they know their limits, and they know the exact price of ignoring their intuition. They will never pay it again. And the person who was shut out is often left confused, saying things like, "I thought empaths always forgave." And they are right. Empaths do forgive. But forgiveness is not the same as reconnection. Forgiveness is the act of releasing anger, loosening the grip of resentment, letting go of the desire for revenge, and wishing someone well from a distance. It is not an invitation to let them back into your life. It is not access. It is not reconciliation. A deeply empathetic person can forgive you completely and still never speak to you again. These two truths do not cancel each other out. Forgiveness is an inner process, something that happens within the self. Reconnection is relational, something that requires trust, safety, and mutual responsibility. One does not depend on the other, and one does not guarantee the other. The empath forgave you the moment they realized you were no longer their responsibility. In doing so, they released you from their emotional concern, but they also released the illusion that one day you might become trustworthy. That hope quietly dissolved. The door was not slammed in anger. It was closed with clarity. The lock was changed. The address was erased. And this is where the story reaches its turning point, the moment when the person who caused the harm finally understands what has happened. The empath is not coming back. This is not a test. It is not temporary distance, not silence meant to provoke reflection, not a strategic pause. It is an ending. And that is when panic sets in. The tension rises. The efforts intensify. Suddenly, there is a desperate search for any reaction at all. Anger surfaces at being ignored. Accusations appear, painting the empath as cold or cruel. Mutual friends are pulled into the narrative. The roles are reversed, and the one who caused the damage presents themselves as the victim. The story is rewritten again and again. The volume increases. The justifications multiply. But none of it matters. Why does it not matter? Because the empath is no longer there. Emotionally, they have already left. They have fully detached. Their energy no longer flows toward you. It has been redirected elsewhere. While this chaos unfolds, the empath has already begun building a different life. A life in which you do not exist. A life with clear boundaries, where intuition is honored, where inner signals are trusted instead of questioned, and where they no longer doubt their own mind. You are not part of that life, and you will never be again. This is the final resolution. The super empath has won, not by destroying you, not by seeking revenge, and not by proving anything to anyone, but by choosing themselves, by protecting their reality, by honoring their truth. This is the highest form of self-love, refusing to dim their light for someone who only feels comfortable when others live in the dark. It is refusing to doubt oneself for someone who benefits from confusion, refusing to shrink in order to soothe someone who is threatened by growth. The empath has stepped into their power, and that power is quiet, calm, and unwavering. It does not need to shout. It does not need explanations. It does not seek validation. It simply exists, grounded and whole. The door is closed. The chapter is complete. The lesson has been learned, and the empath moves forward lighter, clearer, and stronger than ever before. So let me ask you something that is not asked of just anyone. Have you ever felt that moment inside you when something suddenly clicked? It was not rage. It was not drama. It was a clean, unmistakable silence. Have you ever reached that point of no return, that precise moment when you stopped explaining yourself, stopped trying to convince, stopped fighting, and began to protect yourself instead? That moment is not weakness. It is sacred. It is the exact point where you choose yourself over someone else's comfort. It is where you integrate your shadow, not to destroy, but to become whole. When that happens, something settles inside you. You feel complete. If you have lived this, you know exactly what Jung was pointing toward. You understand the power of closing the door. You understand the peace that indifference brings, and you understand this uncomfortable truth. Some mistakes are not forgiven, not because compassion is lacking, but because forgiving them would require betraying yourself. The super empath learns this lesson once. They grow, they evolve, and they do not go back. That is why you must value your boundaries as if they were sacred ground. Trust your instincts, even when others tell you that you are overreacting. Protect your peace above all else. And remember this: not everyone deserves access to your heart. Not everyone has earned your trust. And not everyone will understand when you leave. And that is okay. Your job is not to make them understand. It is not to convince them that you were right. Your job is to honor yourself, to remain faithful to your intuition, and to stop doubting yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much. You are not crazy for noticing patterns. You are awake, and that is profoundly powerful. If this message resonated with you, it was not an accident. This channel does not exist to distract you. It exists to wake you up. Subscribe and activate notifications only if you are willing to protect your intuition, only if you are ready to stop betraying yourself for the comfort of others. Here, we do not feed the noise. Here, we strengthen clarity.